Hey there, I'm Lee Ullman here with some big news from the National Young Farmers Coalition. We're partnering with Heritage Radio Network on a special season of The Farm Report. It's all about what's happening with the Farm Bill and how it impacts farmers and eaters.
I am growing diversified vegetables on land that's been in our family for 150 years.
And so with the pandemic, gentrification, property values going up, we had to sell the land and we lost it.
Join us as we uncover the untold stories behind this massive piece of legislation that shapes how we grow our food, what we eat, and so much more.
The problems we have had, those are things that come from earlier Farm Bill and USDA policy, right? Like Earl Butz, get big or get out.
You know, it's my responsibility to know not only what I'm eating, but then like how that all came to be. And realize like, wow, like this piece of legislation, all this money, like it's technically something that I support as a taxpayer.
While Congress debates the next Farm Bill, this is not just an invitation to listen. It's a call to action. Be part of the conversation. Subscribe to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network, wherever you listen to podcasts.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network, broadcasting live from Bushwick, Brooklyn. If you like this program, visit heritageradionetwork.org for thousands more.
Bonnie knows when you plant something, it keeps on giving. Growing from friend to neighbor to community. Generations of gardeners have trusted Bonnie for fresh, healthy vegetable and herb plants. Rely on Bonnie for quality plants, help, and support. Bonnie, gardening with you since 1918. BonniePlants.com.
There?
Hey, I'm here. Are you there? Here.
Yeah.
Okay, we're ready to go. Well, hello.
Hello.
You're listening to Chef Story, and I'm Dorothy Cann Hamilton, and welcome. We're coming to you from Roberta's in downtown Bushwick, Brooklyn, and it's a beautiful summer day. And my guest today on Chef Story is Matthew Lightner of a Terra restaurant in New York City. And I have to say that this native of Nebraskan has come and taken New York by storm. I mean, Adam Platt from New York Magazine came in and gave him 4 stars. The New York Times gave him 3 stars, and he's earned a spot on Bon Appetit's Best New 50 Restaurants. And, of course, he wasn't overlooked by Food and Wine Magazine as a rising star chef, and he only opened in March of 2012. And it's one of the hottest restaurants to get in New York City. And welcome, Matthew.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
I'm excited, and I was very excited. I was at your restaurant a couple of weeks ago. I was incredibly impressed that I got in. And I ate with Maxime Vallet, which was wonderful because he guided me through your menu. And we'll talk about that menu a little later. But I just want to tell people a little bit about your background, because you are from Nebraska, but you know your culinary heritage is quite international. And you went to school at the Western Culinary Institute out in Oregon, and then you worked out there as well. But in between, you've worked at such places as Noma and Mugaritz in Spain. And so tell me, let's get right into growing up in Nebraska. What was your culinary history as a child, and what led you from Nebraska to Noma?
Well, I mean, it pretty much started getting into the industry was to make money. When I was 14, I wanted to have extra money so I can buy shoes and things like that. So washing dishes was a very easy thing to do. And at that time, my brother and sister both worked at a restaurant. So I started washing dishes.
This is in Nebraska?
In Nebraska, yeah. And then I wanted to learn how to cook. I've been very intrigued with the restaurant industry my entire life.
Did your parents take you to nice restaurants?
Not really nice restaurants. We thought they were very nice, but now that I look back, it's a little different. But no, we used to go out a lot with family, and I was always amazed how it seemed like going to a restaurant pretty much like turned a switch, and then everyone was talking, everyone was drinking, everyone was having a good time. So it's like before you're at the house and everyone's just sitting there on the couch, and when we go visit family, and not much was really going on. But then once we went to the restaurant, it's like, oh, everyone woke up a little bit, everyone talked, and there was like this excitement, like, oh, wow, there's this good food, there's going to be good drinks, we're really going to enjoy ourselves, and we have our family with us. And I was always amazed by that, how a restaurant had such power to do such things. And that's where I pretty much had this intrigue to wonder how that even happens.
So what was your favorite restaurant, and what was your favorite dish when you were a kid?
Oh, I don't have it's hard for me to have a favorite restaurant as a kid. I don't know. That's a good question.
Could have been, a Dairy Queen.
Well, it probably actually was, there was a fast food place called Runza that I actually worked at, and it's pretty funny. But they would do like these like pockets, like with ground beef and cabbage, and it was all made in house. And I mean, that was like, everyone would go there, and it would be like this amazing thing.
Sounds good, actually.
Yeah, it's really good, and they haven't really branched out further than like Nebraska. There's a couple of places in Missouri as well, but pretty interesting.
So, how did you migrate west to Portland?
So, at the time I was getting out of high school, I was pretty done with being in the Midwest. I was like, okay. I've lived in the Midwest for 18 years. I've never been out of the Midwest. I've never traveled anywhere else. I haven't done anything. Okay, I need something. And I've always been intrigued to go to the West Coast. I had like this, calling to get there, either in California or in Oregon some way. For some reason, it was like the Pacific Ocean was like calling me at night while I was dreaming. I don't know what it really was, but... my sister, she would travel around a lot with her friends, and, she came back from a trip to Oregon, and she pretty much convinced me. It's like, oh, you should move there with me. You should go to this culinary school. Because at that time, I wasn't really thinking about too much pursuing as the rest of my life kind of career, but I knew I didn't want to go to college. I was done with classrooms. I was done with that. I was like, I cannot sit down for an extended period of time. I just wasn't interested in it. And I have to be doing something with my hands. I knew one way or the other. And so that's where I went. And for the very first time that I actually got out of the Midwest was shortly after that. We went there on a trip. And of course it was like, Portland, Oregon in July. The most beautiful city in the country at that time of year. It rains in the morning. The flowers, the wild herbs, the mountains, the backdrop, like it has everything. And it pretty much took my breath away. I mean, this is the first time that I've ever been to the West Coast. This is the first time I've ever been out of the Midwest. Was basically the first time I've ever been in a plane. Was the very first time I've ever seen the ocean was that weekend.
Wow.
And
do you remember what you felt when you first saw the ocean?
Yeah, I was like, why in the hell have I not seen this sooner? I was like, what is wrong? It's like everyone, it's like, I have to be here. I have to do that. And so at that moment, I kind of had this, inner like force, like driving force that, I need to go and see as much as I can see. I need to have stories. I need to live in different cities. I need to see different cultures.
How old were you when you first moved out there? 18, 19?
18.
Yeah. So how about the food? How was the food different when you moved out there?
Well, the food is, coming from a very impressionable mind, that the food is what you wanted it to be. I think or what you want it to be if you were learning how to cook, because of the product. I grew up, my very first cookbook was Alain Ducasse, Flavors of Provence.
That was your first cookbook?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What an introduction.
Yeah, and because, it's... my mother's parents, they had a farm, they grew vegetables. Everyone did vegetables, but when you looked at this book, you're like, God, what are these vegetables? They are so pristine. You know, and you're kind of a little naive, and you're like, oh yeah, it's good photography or whatever. It didn't matter. You thought it was the vegetables. It's nature. It's shining for itself. And to get, that's what you wanted. You wanted to walk to, like, as a chef who was just learning how to cook, I wanted to walk to a market and then have someone show me, well, this is fennel and this is eggplant and this is what you do with these things. And then I end up...
Had you seen fennel before?
Yeah, I've seen fennel before. I've seen a lot of vegetables, especially in some of the restaurants that I was working at in the time leading up to my departure from there. But you don't see all these exotic... they weren't even exotic. They were just perfect, these vegetables that you looked in the book. And, you know, once I got to Portland, it had that same feel. The market, you would go there, had a very European kind of feel. The city felt very European. The food was very, you know, French-driven, very French-inspired, but more vegetable-driven, more Provençal kind of style, which was perfect. And so I did have that great introductory, and it's a perfect place to go for people in the same situation as me.
So what was the first restaurant you worked in?
The very first restaurant would have been a place called Summer Kitchen Cafe. Yeah, and it
sounds like a lot of vegetables.
Well, it's actually something that I find, you know, more so now in my life dear to my heart.
Which is what?
Well, it's just like a very classic Midwest American food. You know, everything was made in house. They made their own cakes, they make their own cookies, they make their own bread. You know, they do like hot turkey sandwiches. You know, they do patty melts, you know, stuff like that. But like really, really good, everything homemade. And you don't see that as much anymore. You see it, there's a lot of it, but people buy the rye bread from this company or they buy the pre-made patties. But no, it's like all the detail and the thought process that went into making that food, which was just very simple, very common food, was so beautiful. And that's why they were successful at doing what they were doing.
So how long did you stay there?
Well, I started washing dishes there and kind of worked my way up through the kitchen.
Were you going to school at the same time?
Yeah, I was going to school at the same time. So would wash dishes at nighttime, wash dishes early in the morning on the weekends. Eventually, I had just this intrigue. I was very curious at how you make bread, how you make sauces, how you do all this different stuff. And I was just really intrigued with it, and I was a hard worker.
I also read somewhere you were intrigued with the dishwasher and how they washed dishes and how precise.
Well,
can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the washing dishes is. I think people, you know, it's a tough profession. You know, people don't look at it as a profession, but I mean, I loved it. I liked the fact that it was clean and it was organized, because that was your job. You cleaned and organized the plates and all the silverware and all the pots and pans to function for the entire restaurant. So I always took it as a challenge that I was going to be better, faster, cleaner, and that if I was doing that, I was helping the entire restaurant, and people would notice that. And the place was spotless. But this was a very rare, you know, that I think about it, very rare kind of kitchen in that sense, is that the restaurant cleaned like it was a Michelin star restaurant, but it was a cafe. They were doing 1,000 covers a day. You know, they would pull the entire lines out, and the dishwashers would scrub behind all the cooking equipment every single night.
Wow.
You know, the cooks would clean all their floors, and, you know, being a part of that was very awesome and very invigorating.
Do you have an opinion of young cooks today, of having not gone through that?
I don't know. I think everything's just, you know, different. Things change and people are different. You know, I think in my management style, I can't really think about that too much. I just have to kind of, you know, you get impressionable people into your kitchen and you have to kind of figure them out a little bit. You can't really force people to do anything. So you got to kind of feel if they will actually work, will fit in, or they won't. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, you should probably work washing dishes, work in kitchens then go to culinary school, then learn like the details of that, because you already know how to work, you already have experience on your resume, and then you should step out, and then you do your apprenticeships and your interns and your traveling and things like that, and then you go back and you work for a long period of time with the chef.
So tell me about the travel bug. When did that bite you, and when did you go off to Europe?
Well, I think it pretty much bit me the moment I got on the airplane for the first time and I landed in a miraculous new place that had greenery and beauty and everything. And not to say that the Midwest is not beautiful, because it's very dear to my heart, but it was just different, and we spoke briefly about how when you're in something so much, I call it the beach effect. You live on the beach, you don't go to the beach, that you need something new and different. You need to be able to appreciate the two. And getting out, really allowed me to appreciate it. And I always knew, and just reading all these great New York City chefs, reading about how, they studied in Paris, or they came from here, and they worked under this guy and this chef. And I knew at some point that I had to get to Europe. That was just, you have to do it.
Well, we're going to have to take a break, but when we come back, the generation before you, of chefs, they all did go to Paris. But today, chefs aren't going to Paris. They're going elsewhere, and you went elsewhere. So we're going to come back and talk about that. You're listening to Chef's Story, and we'll be back in a minute.
Bonnie knows when you plant something, it keeps on giving. Growing from friend to neighbor to community. Generations of gardeners have trusted Bonnie for fresh, healthy vegetable and herb plants. Rely on Bonnie for quality plants, help, and support. Bonnie, gardening with you since 1918. BonniePlants.com.
Well, welcome back. You're listening to Chef's Story. I'm Dorothy Cann Hamilton from the International Culinary Center, sitting in beautiful downtown Bushwick, Brooklyn at Roberta's. And today, is my guest is none other than Matthew Lightner, the celebrated chef of Atera down on Worth Street in New York City. We are definitely delving into that restaurant, and it's so fascinating, so delicious. But before that, we were on your culinary journey of being the chef you are today, and you had the travel bug to go to Europe. Where was the first place you wanted to go? How hard was it to get there? What happened?
Well, the first place that I wanted to go was definitely France, and so I thought, well, the best thing that I could do is probably work with a French guy in the United States, and he has family there, and he's worked in restaurants there, and maybe I can finally get there. And never had the opportunity, never had the chance. And I'm out of culinary school, and I'm like, I need to. This is the time.
So you couldn't go to work for a French chef somewhere in America?
No, I mean, I had a couple opportunities to do it, but either I had no money or it was just not the right timing, or and it just always fell through. And then eventually I started working with another guy who knew a great chef in Italy, and he was like, okay, well, I wanted to try to set you up with this guy, and emailed, and it just always fell through. And, we're talking, by that point, I graduated, I was around 20 years old, working, and just never had the opportunity. So this happened in between, 3 or 4 years. I think I was around 24 or 25, and still never really had that chance. And just in multiple different things, maybe like personal reasons, money reasons, restaurants saying, oh, sorry, we're not accepting anything right now. We don't have a place for you to stay. I was like, I can't afford to put myself up. And, it took a long time, and I finally got back to the point where, I started, gaining higher positions in kitchens and sous chef and chef de cuisine, and I ended up making a little bit more money, and I finally got a job offer where it moved me back down to San Diego to work at L'Auberge as a chef de cuisine. And my whole goal was to be there for a few years to save every bit of money that I had and just go and do it, no matter what. And I think at that point, I've lived in Portland a couple times, lived in California a couple times. After culinary school, I had to move back to Nebraska, where I had to stay at home because I was out of money. I couldn't find a job. And it was right around 9/11. I was trying to come to New York right around there because I've been in love with Alain Ducasse my whole life, and I wanted to work with Alain Ducasse at the Essex House, but that was near impossible after 9/11. So I found myself back in Nebraska, and finally got to a point and just saved up money and said, okay, I have enough. I can only go for a few months. It's all I can do. It's like it's better than nothing. And we'll see what happens. And I was like, well, maybe I'll just work my ass off so much that someone will hire me. And that's what most guys think when they go to Europe. It's like that's their whole plan. And my process started with El Bulli. I wanted to go to El Bulli. I was very intrigued by the thought process. I was very intrigued by it. Just seemed so completely different than anything that I have done so far. And that I love to create, I love to explore, and I love to take chances. And I feel like that was one guy who was doing all of it. And, I applied time and time and time and time again, sent, come and work for 3 months, I'll come and do this, and da-da-da. And, I never heard back. And during that time, I started to get more familiar with some of these other Spanish chefs. And here comes this guy, Andoni Aduriz from Mugaritz. And he is his food just seemed like it was something out of a dream, where it was very creative, but not creative like El Bulli. It was something you look at his dishes and they were thought in in a different world.
So where did you hear his name, and how did you find him?
Basically online, and I started seeing these photos, just all online. And, I went to their website and they said, oh, come work with us. And, I sent my resume, and I was lucky to hear back.
Wow.
I think it was in like a week or just a few days. It was very, very quick. And they wanted to know if I wanted to go there. And I emailed back, yes, in my really bad Spanish, because I didn't speak any Spanish at all. Well, I just, kitchen dishwasher Spanish that I've been doing my whole career. And I sent him back an email, be like, yeah, that sounds great for how long? And they, he's like, well, we'll call you. And then they call me, and I don't know a word they're saying on the phone. And I'm so nervous. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. It's like, I'm living in California right there. And I remember walking outside, and I lived right in Del Mar and really close to the ocean. I was walking along the railroad tracks at the time while he's on the phone to me. And I'm so elated and nervous that I'm not paying attention to anything that he's really saying or anything that's going on, and I can't really understand what's going on either. But I did pick out a few words. He talked about a beca, which is a scholarship. He talked about, coming in September, and a few different things that I did. And immediately after that phone call, I sent an email back saying, oh, great to see you, just to recap, just in case, because I missed like half of it, and I was so nervous. So what they wanted to do was to have me a part of a scholarship program that takes foreign professionals, chefs, and they immerse them in Spanish culture, cuisine.
How wonderful.
Yeah, and very lucky, very random as well.
How long was that? How many other people showed up?
So there's 15 of them. Majority of them were Danish. I think there was like 8 chefs from Denmark, 2 chefs from the United States. So out of thousands of applications to this process, there was only 2 Americans actually picked, and I was one of them, so wow. Very lucky. But Andoni picked me, and he wanted me to be a part of it, which was even more crazy. I didn't even know how something like that happens, had it been just as random could be.
He picked your resume?
Yeah. And so there kind of started the whole...
So people talk about Mugaritz like it's, Mount Olympus.
Well, it is. I mean, it's a culinary temple.
Explain to people out there who might not have heard of Andoni, and what makes him so special?
He is it's interesting because there's a lot of genius cooks out there. There's people who do very interesting combinations with stuff that people are like, wow, no one's ever done this before, and it's delicious, and they get a lot of fame for it. But he is, he's almost a god who happens to be a chef. You know, he has like these powers that he's able to conjure up like these feelings and these emotions and all these different things and do it through food. And you look at him and, you know, he's not a traditional cook. He's fine, but he's, you know, a complete intellect who decided to use that, you know, and use like his poetry and use his intelligence for food and to get his point across.
Can you
through food.
describe a dish that just, you know, would exemplify that?
Well, you know, one of the very first ones that I had the pleasure of eating was his gnocchis of the idiazabal, where they're almost like little melting spheres of cheese in like a pork broth. And it almost looks like they're just floating around in this perfectly clear broth, and they're like glowing. They're like little headlights in the plate with all meticulously picked and perfectly placed herbs. And you eat it, and it's like a texture you've never had. And you're like, did this come from Japan, or did it come from Spain? Where did this, you know, it's like...
Did he use spherification?
No. He was using, one of the guys, very first guys to really start using kuzu, which is just a natural root that thickens things, and it's used a lot in Asian cooking. He was one of the first guys to use it. So he'd make like this beautiful water from this really old idiazabal cheese that's right up the street from where he grew up, and that he's known, the guy who is...
he's up in the mountains, right?
Yeah.
In the Basque Country. Yeah.
And that was one of the very first dishes that kind of blew me away. And, you know, I was very fortunate to... Once I was on this trip, and they took us all over. They took us to El Bulli, they took us to Martin. They took us all around to like really immerse us in what culinary traditions and innovations are in Spain. And the very first time was a week before I started working at Mugaritz. Was I got to go in for dinner, and I still have a picture somewhere. I don't know where it is, but I'm wearing like this like black suit kind of thing, and I'm pale, not smiling, and just like completely nervous. Like I'm standing in front of the garden like, well, how am I here right now? I am so nervous I don't even want to eat. You know, it's like I almost lost my appetite. I was just like, I can't. This is just, you know, and the very first thing you do is just, all these chefs and all these young guys, they walk into the kitchen and they see these guys working. It's so clean and quiet. You could hear a pin drop. And immediately you're like anxious and nervous, like, wow, this is insane. You know, like every little, like they were doing a vegetable dish that has 30 different vegetables and 40 different kinds of herbs and flowers, and they have 10 people plating up one dish, and it's just something that I've never seen before. And to see it in real life, it was a truly amazing.
So, was it from there that you went to Noma?
Well, I was there so I stayed at Mugaritz for a year and a half.
That's a long time. Why did you stay so long?
Well, the program was for a year. After when I started, they basically said, you know, learn how to speak Spanish better, and you could probably have a career here. So, you know, briefly after getting there, they hired me on as well. So I was also on the scholarship and was hired on.
You must have been good.
And, well, I loved it. You know, I love that fact. You know, some of my best friends I met there. They're in China, Argentina, they're in Peru, they're all over the world.
You didn't have luxury living conditions either, did you?
Well, no, I mean, I'd stayed in a bunk bed. One of my best friends, Pedro, he was my roommate, and we kind of had a weird relationship. You know, I was on the top bunk, he was on the bottom bunk. You know, I would hand him my glasses at the end of the night, he'd put them on the little table for me, and, you know, like I'd make breakfast one day for him, he'd make you know, it's like it was a very interesting thing because you spent so much time together, and we'd worked the same station together. And but eventually I moved on. They were like, okay, you know, you need to go and live with the people who also work there, and not just the stagiaires or the internships. And I ended up staying with Linda, who was the sommelier there, Oswaldo, who's still there, who does R&D there. Really two amazing people, complete superstars. So it was a pretty miraculous experience.
But how were you personally changed?
Well, it was a challenge for me. So most of the people who were there were probably 18, 19, 20, 21, maybe high as 25, and I was 27. I finally this is my opportunity to finally go to Europe. Very first time. Just got my visa just before I went. And, I was the old one. I was 27 years old, and I was the old one in the kitchen. I think the chef de cuisine, Jorens, was like 24 at the time.
Oh my gosh.
A complete superstar. Like, I was like, and that's nervous. But it kind of helped me. Like, I had a chip on my shoulder then. Like, I had to do it. And you looked at everything different. Like, you always knew how to pill shrimp. And so I would go and just start pilling this, like, shrimp that they would have. And they'd be like, no, you're pilling it wrong. And so it was like a completely retraining of everything that I've learned. So I had to throw everything out and relearn everything again.
Were their techniques great?
Yeah, I mean, the techniques were so specific to them, and that was special. Because anyone can do techniques. Techniques are everywhere. We use techniques that other people do, but they decide to not use techniques, but they want to create their own, and if it takes them 3 or 4 years before it's ready, then they're going to wait 3 or 4 years. This level of patience is not found in a lot of restaurants. The Mugaritz has been around for 15 years. They went from doing, a stuffed tomato with squid and covered in beef glaze to, fake walnut shells and all kinds of crazy things, and to where they are now. And it just shows the level of patience and the level of drive that they have to get there.
So then, was Noma right after that?
Yeah, so, I happen to know a lot of Danish people when I was through the whole
program.
The whole program. And they're, the Danish guys, they're very proud of what's going on there. And they were like, Spain's great, but you have to get up here. Spain's great, but it's nothing like the food that we're doing up there right now. And I was very lucky to get up there as well, and to do a very short stage at Noma.
So was the food, how did you compare the Mugaritz to the food in Noma?
Well, much different. So in Spain doesn't use a lot of French influence. So you don't see a lot of butter. You don't see a lot of, you see stews, but you don't see like the typical braises and things like that. It's much different.
We have a Spanish program at the International that Jose Andres has authored, and I don't know, but one recipe, some basil crept in there, and he had a fit, and he said, "We don't use basil in Spain." I had no idea. Calm down, guy. Calm down. All right, no basil.
Yeah, so you see a little bit more of this influence. So it's like some of these hearty, and the climate has a lot to do with it. Some of this like hearty, almost like French techniques. Like I think one of the dishes that I saw at Noma was I think it was a piece of oxtail or something that they were basting out at the end with butter.
Oh.
And I was like, I haven't seen that in a year and a half. Ugh. No one based anything out in Spain. It's all olive oil. Sear the fish in olive oil. Meat with olive oil. And it's like, it's complete.
And the Danes like their butter.
Yeah, definitely. And it was really interesting to see that. But more so, I was very fortunate to go into the kitchen just a brief time at Noma to see, it was me and one other stagiaire at the time at Noma. This was just before, I think a year before they got number one in the world. But you got to see a guy like Rene, very young, very passionate, with so much pressure. He was able to really recreate landscapes by just utilizing product that was around. That was just indigenous product to Scandinavia. And it's amazing because now I think everyone tries to make everything look like outdoors or nature, but just by utilizing that product and put it on the plate, it just did.
So what was the flavor profile? How was it different, Mugaritz to Noma?
Well, so Noma uses a lot of acid. They're all into their vinegars, their acids, their fermentations, their beers and stuff like that. There was a lot of that. Now, in Spain, it's more about oils and textures of fish, like bacalao, ham, the fat, how it kind of covers your mouth. It's more in that vein, and it doesn't have, you don't see a lot of acid all over food in Spain. But up in there's a lot of vegetables, but you don't see vegetable cookery as much as you do, or as I was seeing up in Copenhagen as well, where they were using, like a carrots was the main part of the dish, but beef glaze was a very tiny little piece in it.
We're going to talk about your carrot when we come back. We're going to take another break here, and we'll be back in a minute. I'm talking to Matthew Lightner of a Terra Restaurant in New York, and you're listening to Chef Story. Well, welcome back. You're listening to Chef Story, and I'm Dorothy Cann Hamilton from the International Culinary Center. And today my guest is Matthew Lightner of Atera Restaurant in New York. We just came back from Noma and Mugaritz in Spain, and listening to all of that real education that you were getting. How did all that get distilled into Atera? If you were going to say what were your biggest influences for what you do today, does Mugaritz and Noma play a part?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I think, I think Renee and Indoni would both agree that you can give recipes. Just here, take them, have my recipes, go. But what's more valuable is kind of the philosophy. And, from a guy like Renee taking things that were, like unripened elderberries, and those became his capers. That philosophy to me was mind-blowing, was life-changing. And Doni having the ability to break barriers of recipes, traditional stuff, and to look at something pure and raw and naked again, that influences me a ton. Because I feel like if I do want to do something unique with vegetables or meat, or I have to break down the recipes. I have to, I'm talking a lot about this right now with all the guys in the kitchen. We're kind of starting these large webs of recipes and flavor profiles and things that we think are in common to an American palate. And then what we're doing is we're erasing everything around it, and then we're starting again.
So give me an example.
Examples are tough in that sense, but what we're doing is, for example, like we would take, and I say this a lot, so people are probably like, he says it a lot, this is redundant on the radio. But like an eggplant, for instance. So we look at the eggplant, and I think immediately we think, like capers and garlic and tomatoes and red pepper, and basil and all these different things that go with it. And we were looking at that, and we're going, we have to know that, all right? We have to know that, and then we erase it and go, okay, let's just grill a piece and let's try it, okay? And it's just like a new wine, It's like you drink the wine, you're like, what are you getting out of this vintage today, and what's happening here? And to have a new, erasing these like old common profiles that you always go to, it's like safety little zones, and then allow something to speak new and speak different. We really work on trying to do that a lot. And I feel like Indoni was a genius at doing that.
Mm-hmm. So, when I was there, we had 25 courses, little bits and some bigger bits. Why did you go to that format? And then start telling me about the magic on the plate, because it really is magical. You find things you've never heard of, or you see things and they're the most common thing, but they don't look like what it's supposed to be. It challenges you, not just gustatorially, but intellectually. It's such an exciting place to eat. Why did you do it? Why did you do that in 25 courses?
Well, it's funny because people have been asking a lot now. I think there's this question now people want to know. It's like smaller menus or bigger menus? What's the thing? And for us, it just depends. We feel like the meal needs to tell a story. Even though we are, only being a year old, the story isn't quite being able to be told quite yet. It's going to be a process. It might take many of meals. It might take many of years. And we all kind of know that, this level of clarity that we want to get across. So, part of it is product and seasonality when it comes in, and having these available things and having these ideas that you want to show with people. Mm-hmm. And part of it is us trying to find out where our story is. And if we don't put certain things on, or we don't try certain things, we're never going to know. You'll never be able to answer those things. And so it's almost like a sense like the people who do come in are somewhat guinea pigs for that. That, if we want to try it, if we want to push ourselves forward, to see if it fits in, to see if that fits into our voice of what we're trying to do.
So a lot of our listeners have not eaten your food. Mm-hmm. I want you to describe to them the Kyoto carrot.
Yes, so the carrot is, it's a very tough product to get. We get very few from the farmer's market. And the very first time I saw it, they were very young, and they had a really beautiful red skin on it, like bright red skin. And we were working on just roasting some things over aromatic like wood chips and spices, and cooking it for 3 or 4 hours with the skin on, because the skin protects it. And Donnie started to use this technique with calcium that builds a second skin. And he was able to cook it for very long and be a puree on the inside. And what we wanted to do is just allow the natural skin to do that. And so it roasted for a long time. And I don't know what happened. I think we were putting it it was a special vegetarian menu or something like that. And one of my sous chefs was making a dish with it. And it was like, well, we're going to put those Kyoto carrots on for one dish. I go, okay, cool. Let's check it out. And when it was when we were in service, one of the cooks had it in the oven a little too long. And way too much olive oil all over it, and then it came out, and it resembled like a cayenne chili pepper, like a dried chili.
It does.
And I was like, what is that? I was like, you're going to put a whole chili on a plate? Like, I fooled myself almost, I was like, and it just got us thinking. It got us thinking about, to cook it like that, to change kind of perception a little bit, and change how you eat a carrot every single day. And some of the funny thing is, and then we start playing with peppers and smoked fermented chilies to go with it. And some of the best carrot dishes I've ever had have been prepared, almost like a traditional Mexican way, with these spices and things. So it just seemed to work perfect.
Tell me about the halibut with buttermilk whey.
Well, the halibut, what we wanted to do when we first started doing this dish, and we did it last year as well, because it's a very seasonal product. It's halibut. I'm from cooking in Oregon for such a long time. Halibut season was always great, and to hear that they have amazing Nova Scotia halibut as well, which I'm sure you
Nova
like.
Scotia.
Yeah. And it's just different. The texture is different. The flavor is different. I mean, the water is different. I really enjoy it a lot. And we wanted to. It was right during a time where chamomile petals were starting to come up. It was during a time where black locust flowers were budding everywhere. And we wanted to enhance the beautiful velvet color of it, the white color. And when we lightly cook it in almost like a bouillon of whey and lemon and aromatic vegetables, and just lightly poach it, very traditional. And then we take some of that poaching liquid and we mix it with the chamomile oil, it's so brilliant and white. And before, we would just paint the fish with it and then coat it with these white flowers. So it was just white plate, white fish, white flowers, and that was basically it. And now we have a couple other different little flowers in there and stuff, just for some texturial kind of points in the dish. And then the idea is to almost it's almost like a pill. It's almost like taking the gelatin out, taking that broth and stock from the bones, taking that gelatin out, reducing it down, emulsifying it, very traditional way, and painting the fish with it. Because that kind of fish is amazing. It's a very lean fish. It's not a fatty fish, but it has high gelatin. It's very similar like a turbot does. But you don't get that a lot of the times. And we wanted to take that and add that, because the texture of the fish becomes very, very amazing. And it almost becomes like chunks of like lardo that are falling off on other fish.
It's extraordinary. It's unique and extraordinary. Tell us about the lamb rack with black walnut.
So the lamb that we're getting in, black walnut is a very indigenous walnut tree to the northeast. It's something that I got the chance of having, I think it was about 2 years ago in Oregon, actually, and I think the walnuts came from Italy. And when I ate them for the very first time, they had like this amazing blueberry-ish kind of flavor to it, almost like this musty blueberry flavor. And I believe we did like a black walnut ice cream with blueberries, something like that. And it was, for me, that was like one of those life-altering combinations that you happen to stumble across. And when we talked about the lamb, that we get the lamb in, we age it for about a month, and when we cook it, it just... These kind of lambs feed on a lot of different aromatic, like sage and all these different brushes. And when you cook it, the fat renders out and it has this beautiful, fruity, aromatic kind of flavor to it. And I wanted to pair it with black walnuts because I felt like it adds this level of like depth. And then I wanted to make like a gravy. I like the idea of just like sausage and gravy. I like more so than maybe the spice or the sausage is that it's the texture. So what we do is we take some of the lamb fat that's out of it. We make almost like a bechamel. We put sprouted wheat berries that are raw inside of it, and they almost mimic like a lamb sausage kind of on the inside, and chopped up black walnuts. And it just has this amazing texture and flavor. And just the two things alone. We like to have flavor combinations like that even if we had a very casual restaurant, we just put a bunch of lamb and a bunch of the pot of the gravy onto the bowl, and people just eat it.
It's extraordinary, the balance and the real mastery of flavor, texture, seasoning. I mean, it's just, I mean, people have to experience. I'm so glad you're describing these dishes. I wish I could go through the 25 that I had. Tell me, where do you like to eat when you're on your day off?
Well, definitely Roberta's.
Here we are.
I mean, but Carlo's doing something really special at Blanca. When I was able to eat here, I knew it was going to be good, but I was surprised at actually how really good it was, and just how fresh he kept the ingredients and how pure he kept the ingredients. And you can go to a lot of sushi places and kind of have that, but I think sushi places sometimes they miss a little bit of personality. And I think when you want to eat, you want to get inside someone's head, and when you eat there, you get inside Carlo's head about how he feels about the vegetables he likes, the fish he likes, the pastas he likes. I mean, it's truly remarkable.
Well, we're really fortunate to have you in New York City. I hope we're going to keep you for a while.
Thank you. I'm fortunate to be here.
Okay, you don't have that travel bug?
Well, my job allows me to travel quite a bit now. So,
good, because we don't want to lose you.
Yeah, no,
we don't want to lose you.
Not.
Well, this has been fun. We've actually gone over time, but
it's been great.
Really great to have you here, Matthew. And please, it's hard to get into Atera, but don't give up. It's one hell of a restaurant. Thanks. You've been listening to Chef's Story, and this is Dorothy Cann Hamilton, and I'm going to say goodbye and see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this program on heritageradionetwork.org. You can find all of our archived programs on our website or as podcasts in the iTunes Store by searching Heritage Radio Network. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at heritage_radio. You can email us questions at any time at info@heritageradionetwork.org. Heritage Radio Network is a non-profit organization. To donate and become a member, visit our website today. Thanks for listening.